Hi, I'm Diane Hullett, and welcome to the Best Life, Best Death podcast. I'm here today with a special guest, Gary Roe, who is an author, a grief specialist, a former pastor and missionary, and someone who just brings so much to the conversation about grief and loss. Welcome, Gary.
Hi, Diane. Thanks. Glad to be here.
And when I say Gary's an author, I mean, he is a prolific author. You can find out more about Gary on his website, GaryRoe.com, and you'll see just a wide range of books that all are trying to, I think, help with the isolation of grief.
That's a good way to put it.
It's a good way to put it. One of the things I found on Gary's website is just a beautifully titled little article called Loss, Grief, and Aging in a COVID World. And as Gary and I were chatting, we kind of felt like that's really the topic, that's what's up for people.
It really, it really is. I am so sick of hearing about COVID. I know we all are, but yet here it comes again, and there's another variant, and there's another this, and there's another that, and that means this, and that means that, and we're never going back to normal, but we don't know what normal is. And we've all lost a lot through this process, whether it's just a sense of normalcy, maybe a sense of safety, maybe a sense of security. Some of us have, who knows, some of us might have lost jobs, loved ones, you name it. The whole world is immersed in grief, but I think a lot of people don't realize that that's what it is. It's grief. There's all this change going on. It's just like someone who's had a significant loss in their lives, significant where the world seems much the same, looks much the same, but it's not the same for them. Everything has changed and they don't know what it's going to be like yet. And here we are, the whole human race is there. Right now.
Interesting. I'm reminded of those moments when you're in a doctor's office and you get a diagnosis and there's simply the before and the after. And I remember sort of feeling like, the freight train of COVID was coming and those little red dots on the John Hopkins maps. And here we all are quite a bit later, but as you said, kind of swimming in grief. How do you, how would you describe, what are the symptoms of grief that we're seeing around us?
Well, I think, excuse me, grief hits our entire being, and it's hard to compartmentalize things, but I'm a guy, so I'm really good at that, right? Love to put things into boxes of, it hits our emotions. That's what we feel the most, but it also hits our mental capacities, our ability to focus, hits us physically. We have weird symptoms, even if we don't have COVID. It hits our relationships. This whole thing with COVID has really hit our relationships. They're definitely changing. It hits us spiritually, so it hits our souls. It hits what we believe, why we believe what we believe. Is that changing? Are we sure about that anymore? Are we more sure about that? And then it hits our future, which is, what's that going to be? But, the main things that people really struggle with in this are the emotions. We have learned to be in a very emotional global society. If it doesn't feel good, we don't want anything to do with it. Well, grief never feels good. There's sadness, there's anger, there's frustration, there's confusion, there's regret, there's guilt, there's depression, there's fear, there's anxiety, even panic and terror. All of those things are a part of grief. And when a person begins experiencing kind of all of those things, at least on some level, they're grieving. It just, perhaps they need to pinpoint what exactly they're grieving. Because for all of us in this COVID era, all of us are experiencing a major loss of some kind. But sometimes it's helpful to hang a label on that, so that we know, I've really lost my future as I knew it. Or
right, or for students, it's like, I've lost what I thought would be a normal freshman year, or I've lost what I thought would be particular time of hanging out at high school parties or something. Or
yes,
as you said,
yes.
or a loss of a sense of normalcy, even that as broad as that is a loss.
It is. It's huge. I have one teenager left at home, little rabbit trail here, who's a freshman in high school. And just from dialoguing with school counselors and teachers since the COVID era, it was challenging being a school counselor or teacher before, but now the challenge is on steroids. I mean, there are so many more issues because fuses are a little shorter, anxiety is higher, depression is deeper. All the issues that we had before are just exacerbated
Right.
now. And
Right.
it just makes life so much more challenging. I see it most often, I experience it most often on the road when I'm driving. I say that because everybody seems to be going nowhere very quickly.
In a
and
very agitated
in
state.
a very agitated state, and driving at high speeds right on each other. And it's like it's palpable. You can almost feel it in the air, this tension that something's about to explode. Just sometimes everywhere we go,
Yeah.
in a restaurant, if we can go to a restaurant, or Target or Walmart or whatever it might be, the world has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know anybody that I've met that would say, oh, it's changed for the better. I like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
I haven't met anybody that says that. There might be somebody out there, but it's just a challenge. I think we feel more alone than ever before. We normally feel alone, and I think we kind of need to embrace that because nobody's in our heart but us.
Mm-hmm.
And so people know us and we know them, but we really don't know the depths of their hearts. Each one of us is a unique individual, unique in all of human history, even if we're a twin. And so that in itself is incredibly special. But the backside of that is that's kind of lonely.
Right. Right.
And when we lose someone in grief, I mean, grief is inherently lonely because you've got two people unique in all of human history, which means there was a unique relationship there. There's never been another relationship in the history of mankind, exactly like that relationship. Well, no wonder that hurts. I mean, no wonder we feel sad and frustrated and angry and fearful and guilty and all of those other things. It's a real challenge.
But I think the thing that I appreciate so much about your writing and the way you approach grief, Gary, is that you really face it directly, as you just said, naming the emotions and all the layers of difficulty, whether it's COVID or the loss of a loved one. And then you find ways to kind of be proactive and say, how do we keep moving forward? What do we do? So, two questions that I saw from this article on your website, you say, speaking of isolation, how are you doing out there? Number one, do you find yourself feeling isolated in your grief process? And if so, what do you think might help with that? So it's like even within the difficulty and the misery and the challenge of the emotional and all the other levels, what might you do? What might help? And then the second question you posit is, if you're not currently struggling with a sense of loneliness and isolation, do you have some words of encouragement for those who are? So again, asking us to reach out of our isolation and reach towards a friend, reach towards a family member who we know are struggling. So I go back to, this idea that it matters what you go through,
Yes.
and it matters more what you do with it.
Yes. Yes. I had a mentor in college who, after hearing my story is just riddled with loss up till about the age of 15, and then things leveled out for a little bit. And after hearing my story, what he said was, well, Gary, please remember, it's not so much what happens to you, but how you interpret and respond to what happens that's really going to make all the difference. And of course, he was right. I mean, we all can think of examples of people who have gone through extraordinarily difficult things. we can point to some people and say, wow, their life is a war. It's just been a war from childhood on. And yet, and yet they find joy, and yet they are serving and giving to other people. They have not grown bitter. They have not grown unforgiving. They are productive people who are loving the people around them, sometimes at great cost to themselves, and making a huge difference. And sometimes, I really believe this, they're making a huge difference because of all the junk and all the loss that they have been through. There's a phrase out there that says our greatest pain often informs or defines our mission. And what I would say is, wow, if we don't let grief and loss teach us and help us to grow, we will never learn the key thing about life, which is life is not designed to be smooth. I mean, that's obvious. We're built for hard stuff. And that means this life is really about overcoming things. We can argue it's something else all day long, but if you look at people's lives, that's what it's about. We hit roadblock after roadblock, loss after loss, obstacle after obstacle. So it's not about avoiding the obstacles. It's not about avoiding the losses. You can waste your life trying to do that. They'll catch you anyway. So when you meet one, when it does happen, then it's terrible, but on the backside of it, we have a great opportunity to turn something even traumatic around and use it for good. Now that's turning the tables on things. And we really need to do that for our own mental health. It's also a great way to love the people around us. And our world really needs difference makers like that right now. I mean, we've always needed difference makers. We've always needed them. But right now, especially when people need to be comforted, encouraged, inspired, they need examples of how to overcome this, not whatever this is, not settle into it, give into this, give into that, and just go through the rest of our lives thinking we're semi-victims here. I want to go back real quick, Diane, because that triggers something else. It came from the article and then the question you mentioned and something you said about it, but I think people feel stuck a lot. In COVID, I think we felt trapped a lot. The reality is, however, as trapped as we might feel and as out of options as we might think we are, we always have options. We are never really trapped. We might feel trapped. That's okay. We can own up to that. I feel trapped. But the reality is there's always an option to think differently. There's an option to behave differently. There's an option to engage with other people differently. We always have options. And so for folks that are listening and you feel like you're stuck, I would just say you feel stuck for right now.
Right. And what might be another option? And as I think you mentioned here too, how do you find some support for that? Where are the support mechanisms? Where are the people? And if they're not the people that they used to be, maybe there's some new people, maybe there's a new angle of support. So kind of figuring out how to reach out, which I know in the depth of stuck is pretty hard to do.
It's hard.
I love how you frame it.
It's hard.
And this is the human task. This is what we're here doing.
It is. I wish it were easier to reach out when we're wounded and hurting. What we really want is for people to come to us and just be telepathic and know exactly what we need to hear. But I think we're all realistic enough to know that's not going to happen. It might, but anyway, chances are we're going to have to do the hard stuff.
And part of that hard stuff, as you said initially, is knowing that you're someone alone, knowing your own heart. Within your own heart, what do you know about yourself, about what you're grieving or what's difficult, and then how to find that vulnerability to share and
Yes.
reach out. So yeah, I love this, Gary. Are there any last things you would say about, this COVID time of loss and grief?
We've already said it, really, but to summarize, I kind of call them the ABCs of grief. We could call them the ABCs of COVID. A, B, and C stands for something, of course. A, accept yourself. Uh, you know, it, we get kicked into fight or flight so often with all of these emotions and everything. We need to just accept how we are feeling right now and how we're dealing with this, and accept this as it is for the moment. It's going to change, but accept. B is beware. Beware of what? Well, beware of isolation. We've talked about that. That is not our friend. We are designed for relationship. We come out of the womb screaming for it from the get-go, and we are wired for connection. And so that's the C. Connect. Connect. Accept yourself as you are in the moment, whatever that is, rather than trying to fight against it. That just gives it fuel. Run from it, you won't be able to do that. So accepting yourself. B, beware of isolation, and connect, but connect with safe and healthy people. There may be some influences, there probably are, that you need to avoid because they're just not helpful. They're either critical or judgmental, or they're fixers, or whatever it might be.
Or drinking buddies who say, come on, let's go drink this off. Yeah. So how to find some safe people to connect with and healthy.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the ABCs of grief and loss. I bet you've got a book about that.
Not yet.
Great. Terrific. I've been speaking with author and grief specialist Gary Roe, and thank you so much for joining me today, Gary. I think we both talk fast, and so listeners are going to have to actually take their phones and slow it down.
Slow it down.
Everything we have to say, but I just think there's a lot packed in there about talking about what the whole world is going through right now and how we can keep managing this, because I don't know that it's changing anytime soon, right? Here we are at the end of 2021, and
and it feels like we're starting all over again in some ways.
There's a little bit of that.
I know we're not, but absolutely. Pleasure, Diane. Thank you. And
thank you,
to
Gary.
those listening, God bless you. You are not alone. You will get through this, and find some safe people. It'll make all the difference.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Gary. I'm Diane with bestlifebestdeath.com, and you can find out more about me at my website, bestlifebestdeath.com, or my guest, Gary Roe, at his website, garyroe.com. Thanks so much for listening.